Have you ever, reached the end of just a completely exhausting day, collapsed onto the couch feeling overwhelmingly busy, but then you look back and realize you haven't actually accomplished anything meaningful?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you were just running on a treadmill all day.
It is a universally frustrating state to be in, honestly. You get that distinct combination of complete exhaustion and, well, zero tangible progress.
Right.
And it happens because we mistake motion for action. We think that just because we are expending all this energy, we must be moving forward, which, is rarely the case.
Yeah, that is so true. And today, we are looking at a really fascinating case study that tackles that exact feeling. We're pulling from a great source text from the Easy English Deep Dive. It's a narrative case study about a 29-year-old graphic designer named Sophia. And the mission of our deep dive today is to really extract the mechanics of how making tiny systemic changes to your daily routine can completely transform not just your daily productivity, but your overall confidence and even your ability to acquire complex new skills.
It's a really powerful example.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Where does Sophia actually start out in this case study?
Well, we need to map out Sophia's initial baseline first, which honestly is probably going to sound incredibly familiar to anyone who works in a modern office environment.
Oh, for sure.
She works for an international company, and while she actually enjoys her job, her baseline state is essentially just constant cognitive overload. I mean, her days are completely unorganized.
Right, she's just all over the place.
Exactly. She wakes up late, she skips breakfast entirely, rushes out the door to work, forgets tasks, and she has this lingering goal of learning English. But she tries to cram it in only when she happens to find free time.
Which is never.
Right. When a schedule like hers, free time is almost non-existent.
She is just the textbook definition of reacting to life instead of planning it, playing defense all day, every day.
Yeah.
It seems like the core issue isn't even time management for her, it's energy management. She is starting every single day in a massive deficit.
That's exactly it. She is constantly experiencing what psychologists call decision fatigue.
Okay, right.
From the very moment she wakes up late, she is frantically making these micro decisions, like what to wear, should I eat, can I catch this train?
Just constant panic.
Yes. So by the time she actually sits at her desk, her prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for complex planning and willpower, it's already totally depleted.
Whoa.
She ends every single day with that exact feeling you described at the start. Busy, exhausted, but completely unaccomplished.
So that brings us to the moment where everything shifts for her. Sophia is reflecting on her day, and she asks herself a rather pivotal question. She says, what if changing my daily routine could change my life?
It's a great question.
Yeah. She stops looking at external factors like, her boss or her horrible commute, and she starts looking at her own structural habits. And this leads her to a bookstore where she picks up a copy of Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Right, a classic.
Oh, absolutely. Now, anyone who follows productivity even casually knows this book. But as she's reading, she hits this one specific sentence that acts as the catalyst for her entire transformation.
Yeah, the quote she zeroes in on is really one of the foundational principles of behavioral design. It goes, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
It is such a great quote, and I think it highlights a trap a lot of us fall into. We just assume that if we want something badly enough, like learning a language or getting a promotion, that desire will somehow magically manufacture the daily discipline required to achieve it.
Right, which completely ignores human biology.
Exactly.
What the text is showing us through Sophia is that lasting change does not come from these massive, dramatic transformations. I mean, motivation is just an emotion. And like all emotions, it is incredibly volatile.
Right, it comes and goes.
It spikes and it crashes.
Yeah.
So if your ability to study English or, do your job well relies on a sudden spike in motivation, you're going to fail the moment you have a bad night's sleep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sophia realizes in this moment that her problem isn't a lack of drive. Her problem is that she is operating on a faulty system.
Okay, but I have to push back a little bit here on behalf of anyone listening who might be feeling a bit skeptical.
Sure, go ahead.
Because, building a system in the first place still requires a massive amount of motivation, doesn't it? You have to have the willpower to sit down, design the routine, and actually force yourself through the initial friction of doing something totally new.
Well, setting up a system does require an initial injection of cognitive effort, yes. But it's really about where and how you apply that energy.
Okay.
You aren't relying on willpower every single day. Instead, you are front-loading the effort to alter your environment and your automatic behaviors.
Right. I've always thought about it like laying down train tracks. Like relying purely on motivation every single day is like trying to push a heavy car up a steep hill.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
It takes all of your strength, and the second you stop pushing, the car just
Rolls right back down over you.
Exactly. It crushes you. But building a system is like laying the steel tracks.
That framework explains the mechanics perfectly, actually. Laying the steel tracks is hard work up front. It takes conscious effort from your prefrontal cortex. But once those tracks are built, you put the train on them, and it just glides.
It glides, yeah.
In neurological terms, you are transferring the burden of progress from your conscious willpower over to your basal ganglia.
The basal ganglia.
Yeah, that's the part of the brain that handles automatic behaviors,
Right.
so you don't have to force it anymore. The tracks, the neural pathways, essentially they do the work for you.
Wow. Okay. So the true test of that theory is how Sophia actually implements this in her physical environment the very next Monday.
Right.
She decides to lay her first piece of track first thing in the morning. So previously, she was waking up late and just rushing around. Now the very first thing she changes is her relationship with her phone.
Such a crucial change.
Totally. Instead of grabbing the phone immediately upon waking up, she drinks a glass of water, opens the curtains to let the light in, and spends exactly 5 minutes stretching.
And, the constraints she places on this new routine are exactly what make it successful.
How so?
Well, 5 minutes of stretching is so small that the brain's amygdala, which typically resists large, overwhelming changes because it perceives them as a threat to our energy reserves, it just doesn't flag it.
Oh, wow. So she's tricking her brain.
Exactly. It bypasses the brain's natural resistance. And furthermore, she is addressing physiological needs before psychological ones.
Right. The water and the sunlight.
Hydrating and getting natural sunlight into her eyes immediately. It helps regulate her circadian rhythm and optimizes her morning cortisol release. She is physically waking her brain up before demanding it do any heavy lifting.
So she reclaims her morning without exhausting herself. She prepares a healthy breakfast and actually eats it without rushing out the door. But the real game changer happens right before her workday starts. Before she even leaves for work, and critically, before she opens a single email, she sits down and writes out her top 3 most important tasks for the day.
What's fascinating here is the psychological shift that happens when you define your priorities before observing anyone else's.
Right.
Because checking email first thing means you are immediately subjected to other people's emergencies. Your brain enters a highly reactive state.
Yeah, you're just putting out fires all morning.
Exactly. By writing down her own 3 crucial tasks first, Sophia establishes an internal locus of control. She is dictating the terms of her day, effectively telling her brain what a win looks like today before the noise of the office can even distract her.
It is literally the difference between driving the car and being locked in the trunk.
That's very true.
And the results at her workplace, according to the source text, are immediate. Because she plans her day before the emails hit her, she actually finishes her important tasks earlier. She feels significantly less stressed in meetings, and she communicates more clearly with her colleagues.
Her manager even pulls her aside and explicitly tells her, "You become much more organized and confident recently."
That is huge.
It is.
Yeah.
Because when you reduce the cognitive load of constantly figuring out what to do next, that freed up brain power naturally reallocates itself toward better communication and just higher quality work.
And she's not working harder
Right.
or putting in more hours. She just front-loaded the decision-making.
Precisely.
I want you, the listener, to stop and think about your own morning for a second here. When you wake up, are you starting your day on the defensive, reacting to every single notification? Or are you starting on the offensive, setting the terms for what you want to accomplish?
It makes a massive difference.
It's a subtle mechanical difference, but as Sophia shows us, it alters the entire trajectory of the day.
And that reclaimed time and energy gives her the capacity to tackle something that previously felt impossible for her mastering the English language.
Right.
This is a complex, long-term goal that requires deep work, which she previously tried to just force into her schedule only when she felt she had free time.
Which usually meant like long, grueling study sessions on a Sunday afternoon that left her totally burnt out, assuming they even happened at all.
Exactly.
But now she introduces the 20-minute strategy. So she uses her lunch break, she takes the 20-minute walk in a nearby park, and while she's walking, she listens to an episode of the Easy English Deep Dive.
Yeah.
She repeats useful expressions aloud as she walks, learning new vocabulary naturally through the context of the stories.
There is a lot of really solid cognitive science backing up this specific combination, by the way.
Really?
Oh, yeah. First, the dual tasking of walking and listening actually increases blood flow to the brain, which has been shown to improve memory consolidation.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And second, she is learning contextually. So instead of just memorizing isolated definitions off a flashcard, she is hearing how phrases function within a narrative. That creates much stronger associative links in the brain.
And the specific tools and tactics she uses are just incredibly constrained. So alongside the audio, she uses a book called English Vocabulary in Use, but she doesn't try to memorize long lists of words.
No.
She commits to learning just 10 new words a week. And I have to be honest, when I first read that in the source text, 10 words a week sounded absurdly low.
Well, it sounds low if you are measuring success by intensity, but she is measuring success by consistency.
Okay, explain that.
This is a practical application of the spacing effect. By taking just 10 words, writing simple sentences with them, and doing a quick review every evening, she is combating Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve.
The forgetting curve.
Right, it's how quickly we forget new information if we don't review it. If she tried to learn 100 words, the cognitive load would be way too high. She would forget most of them and just feel discouraged.
Right.
But by moving slowly and reviewing frequently, those 10 words actually transfer from her short-term working memory into permanent long-term storage.
That makes total sense. And for reading and speaking, she adds short stories in English for beginners. She reads a story and then summarizes it in her own words. But the tactic she uses next is brilliant, mostly because it tackles the emotional friction of learning a new skill. Sometimes she actually records herself speaking her summary.
Which is terrifying for most people.
Oh, total.
Recording yourself speaking a new language is incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It forces you to confront the gap between your taste, like how you know the language should sound, and your actual current ability. You hear every pause, every mispronunciation.
Yeah, the cringe factor is universally high there.
Right.
No one likes the sound of their own recorded voice, let alone in a language they are struggling to learn.
But the source points out a really crucial mindset shift here. When Sophia listens back and notices her own pronunciation mistakes, she intentionally overrides that natural feeling of embarrassment.
Wow.
She treats the mistake not as an indictment of her intelligence, but just as objective data. The recording is merely a feedback loop for her system.
That is so smart. The underlying mechanics of this success prove that consistency completely trumps intensity. Improving a complex skill does not require marathon study sessions.
No, it doesn't.
It requires short, daily, manageable investments that just compound over time. 20 minutes of walking and listening, 10 words a week, treating mistakes as data.
And all of those small daily investments eventually push past a tipping point. The mechanical execution of her habits, the morning stretching, the proactive task management, the vocabulary reviews, it all begins to foster a profound psychological shift.
And we see this exact dynamic play out in a conversation she has with her friend Emma. Emma notices all this progress and asks Sophia, "How did you become so disciplined?"
I love this part.
Me too.
Yeah.
I love Sophia's reaction to this because she immediately shatters the illusion of the perfect robotic routine. She laughs and tells Emma, "I'm not perfect. I still have difficult days."
Which shatters a really dangerous myth.
Yeah.
People often abandon their systems the moment they fail to execute them perfectly.
Yeah.
If they miss one morning workout, they consider the whole week completely ruined.
Right, but Sophia admits that success isn't about having one flawless day where you execute every habit perfectly. It is entirely about making good choices consistently enough that the structure holds up even on a really bad day.
Exactly.
The routine is a safety net so that when she's exhausted, she doesn't completely derail.
And that safety net reduces her baseline stress, which naturally creates even more cognitive bandwidth for the things she actually values. But the long-term effects of these consistent good choices, they lead to something much deeper than just better time management.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We get this beautiful climax to the case study several months down the road. Sophia joins an English conversation club.
Right.
And the topic for discussion that day happens to be, describe your daily routine.
A wonderfully full circle moment for the narrative.
Oh, absolutely. The source text highlights that in the past, if she were asked to describe her routine, Sophia would have answered with very short, simple, broken sentences. But in this moment, she takes the floor and confidently, fluidly explains her entire life structure. She details her morning habits, her proactive work schedule, her 20-minute study routine, her evening relaxation, and her personal goals.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this moment in the conversation club reveals the true power of systemic habits.
Yeah.
Her daily actions did much more than just organize her schedule or help her memorize a few hundred vocabulary words.
Yeah.
They fundamentally shifted her core identity.
She moved from someone who wanted to learn English to someone who actually is a lifelong learner.
It's a concept known as self-perception theory.
Yeah.
We tend to think that our beliefs dictate our actions, but very often it is exactly the other way around.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, we observe our own actions to figure out who we are. So for months, Sophia watched herself wake up, stretch, plan her day proactively, and study for 20 minutes. Her brain observed this evidence and concluded, oh, I must be a disciplined, proactive person who values learning. She didn't just acquire a language, she acquired a profound sense of self-confidence.
Man, she laid the tracks, the train is moving, and the other learners in the room are just captivated by it. One participant even comes up to her afterward and says, your routine inspired me to improve mine.
That's incredible.
It is such an empowering narrative because the barrier to entry is so low. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's kind of distill the core takeaways from Sophia's journey for everyone listening.
I think the most freeing takeaway from this source text is what is explicitly absent from her strategy. You do not need a complicated, grueling routine to change your life.
No.
You do not need a punishing 5 a.m. wake-up call, cold plunges, or extreme fasting. And you certainly don't need to lock yourself in a room and study for 5 hours every day to master a complex skill.
What matters most is lowering the friction so that consistency is actually possible. Small actions rooted in a well-designed system and repeated every single day create compounding results.
Exactly.
Whether your goal is to improve your English, get healthier, be more proactive at work, or just feel a little calmer and less overwhelmed, your daily routine is the mechanism that manufactures those outcomes.
Yeah.
Every morning is a new opportunity to lay down a piece of track.
And every sentence she practiced, no matter how badly mispronounced at first, was objective data that brought her one step closer to fluency. Her habits became the physical evidence her brain needed to adopt a totally new, empowered identity.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive by talking about that feeling of reaching the end of the day, totally exhausted, but realizing you hadn't accomplished anything meaningful. Sophia found her way out of that trap, not by trying harder, but by building small, conscious systems that protected her time and her energy.
We've seen how conscious, intentional habits actively build the future you want. But human beings are inherently creatures of habit, and our brains will automate behaviors whether we plan them or not. So if conscious habits build our desired future, it's worth examining the opposite. What is one hidden, completely unconscious habit that you engage in every single day without even realizing it? And what alternate future is that unseen habit quietly building for you right now?
I want you to take a second right now and think back to the absolute last time you made a mistake.
Oh yeah, that is always a fun memory to pull up, right?
Right. But seriously, just put yourself right back in that precise moment. Maybe you, I don't know, completely forgot a crucial morning meeting.
Or you were trying to explain a complex idea at work and you just fumbled a really simple word.
Exactly. Or perhaps you tried your hand at a brand new hobby and the result was just an objective disaster.
Oh, I've been there.
We all have. But whatever it was, I want you to recall that specific physical sensation, that sudden hollow drop in your stomach.
Yeah, the heat rushing up your neck and just burning in your face.
Yes, that exact feeling. We possess this deeply ingrained, almost biological instinct to avoid mistakes at all costs.
We really do. We treat them like literal existential threats.
Which is wild, right? But it's a profoundly human reaction.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's deeply rooted in how we are conditioned to process failure. I mean, we treat mistakes as these glowing red warning signs, signaling that something is fundamentally wrong with us.
Like we're broken somehow.
Exactly. We falsely equate a temporary stumble with a permanent lack of intelligence or talent or readiness.
We tell ourselves that, well, if we were truly capable, the execution would have been just flawless right from the start.
Which is such a trap.
It's a massive trap. And that fear of real-time failure is exactly what we are exploring today in this deep dive.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. So we are looking at a narrative case study today. It's titled The Courage to Be Imperfect, Daniel's English Journey.
And on the surface, this looks like a document about a professional trying to master a second language.
Right. But underneath the linguistics, it serves as this brilliant exploration into the psychology of perfectionism, specifically in how we communicate.
Yeah, the mission of this deep dive is really to unpack why flipping our perspective on our own errors isn't just like a nice motivational poster.
Yeah, not just fluff.
Right. It's actually the mechanical secret to learning anything new.
Which requires a huge shift. I mean, a fundamental shift in how we categorize data.
Definitely. Currently, when we make a mistake, our brain just instantly files it under failure.
But the goal is to recategorize that mistake as a necessary data point for growth. And the source material actually brings up a concept I think we've all heard before.
The toddler analogy.
Yes, the classic way toddlers learn to walk.
It's a classic for a reason, though.
It is, sure. But we really need to look at what is actually happening mechanically in the adult brain that makes us lose that grace.
Right, because when a toddler falls for, like, the 20th time, we don't look at them and conclude they just lack the genetic talent for walking.
Right. We don't say, well, walking just isn't for you, buddy.
We cheer for them.
No.
We intuitively understand that every single fall is feeding their brain essential spatial and physical data.
Data about balance,
Yeah.
Gravity, momentum.
Exactly. The falls are the exact mechanism of learning. But as we age, our ego development completely rewires that effective filter.
It totally does. For a toddler, falling is literally just physics.
But for an adult, making a mistake feels like an indictment of our character. The stakes just completely shift from physical mechanics to social and professional survival.
We start perceiving errors as direct threats to our identity, which is so heavy.
It is. And because we lose that grace for ourselves, we start actively seeking out environments where we can hide our stumbles.
Oh, absolutely. We gravitate towards spaces where we can control every single variable. And that actually brings us perfectly to the subject of our case study today, Daniel.
Yes, Daniel.
So Daniel is 31 years old. He's highly intelligent, and he works as a customer service representative for a massive international technology company.
So he's dealing with high-stakes issues all the time.
All the time. He spends his days solving these really complex problems for clients globally. But, and this is the key detail, he does almost all of this via email.
Ah, right. And in that specific environment, Daniel is an absolute superstar.
A total rock star. Because email provides the ultimate psychological shield, right? Asynchronous communication.
Yes, in an asynchronous environment, the threat of real-time failure is just entirely neutralized.
Completely. I mean, he has spell check.
Right.
He has the backspace key. He has the absolute holy grail of adult psychological safety, the delete button.
The delete button is everything.
It really is. If Daniel isn't totally sure about the syntax of a sentence, he can just stop, open a new tab, research the grammar rule, and correct the error before a single person ever sees it.
He gets to present this utterly flawless, curated version of his intellect. He is entirely in control of the output.
Which protects his ego perfectly.
It does. The problem, however, is that professional life just cannot be entirely asynchronous.
No, eventually you have to actually talk to people.
Right. And Daniel's safety net just completely unravels during his department's mandatory Monday morning meetings.
Oh, the Monday morning meetings. These are live, synchronous video calls, right? With colleagues tuning in from all over the world, mixing native and non-native English speakers.
And spoken communication does not have a delete button.
It does not. And this is where we see Daniel's internal conflict just play out in agonizing real time. The case study actually gives us access to his internal monologue during these meetings, and it is fascinating.
It's so relatable, honestly.
It really is. Daniel actually has fantastic ideas. He routinely spots these customer service solutions that the rest of his team totally misses.
But he sits there in absolute silence.
Absolute silence. While his colleagues are brainstorming, Daniel is just trapped in his own head, frantically rehearsing a single sentence.
He's agonizing over whether to use the present perfect tense, or he's second-guessing a preposition, or he's terrified he might mispronounce a specific technical term.
Yeah, he is attempting to run a full diagnostic spelling and grammar check in his working memory simultaneously while trying to participate in a dynamic conversation.
Which is essentially impossible.
It's a massive cognitive bottleneck. Mechanically, it makes me think of what happens to a computer when it just runs out of RAM.
Oh, like the spinning loading wheel of death.
Yes, exactly. You get that spinning wheel on your screen. Daniel's brain is processing so much background data, checking grammar rules, calculating social risk, predicting potential misinterpretations.
Right, so the main application, which is simply speaking his idea out loud, it just times out and crashes.
It completely crashes. By the time the internal loading wheel stops and he finally feels like his sentence is perfectly constructed, the meeting has already moved on.
The opportunity just vanishes. But this cognitive overload actually leads to a really significant breakthrough in Daniel's journal.
Yeah, after one particularly frustrating Monday meeting, he writes something that just distills the entire psychological block.
It's such a great quote.
He notes, "My biggest problem isn't English. My biggest problem is being afraid of making mistakes."
It's a simple observation, but it gets right to the root of the issue.
Right.
Daniel isn't lacking vocabulary or technical knowledge.
Not at all.
What he is lacking is the tolerance for vulnerability. He is completely paralyzed by this assumption that a less than perfect delivery will somehow invalidate his core intelligence in the eyes of his peers.
Acknowledging that fear is a crucial first step, for sure. But the behavioral response to that realization is where things usually go completely wrong.
Oh, absolutely. When adults identify a fear of failure, the default defense mechanism is almost always to double down on control.
We attempt to just force perfection through sheer willpower.
Which brings us to the inciting incident of the case study.
Right, so Daniel's manager announces that the company just landed several major international clients. And to celebrate, every team member is required to give a mandatory 5-minute presentation about a recent successful project.
In English, live, in front of the entire global department.
It is the ultimate synchronous threat. There is nowhere for Daniel to hide.
So what does he do? He goes into absolute overdrive.
Total overdrive. Daniel spends days writing out his 5-minute presentation word for word. He pores over the grammar. He deliberately swaps out simple words for these highly complex, really impressive vocabulary choices.
And then he stands in front of his bedroom mirror and just practices the script.
For over an hour at a time.
Just repeating the exact same monologue over and over, trying to drill it into his muscle memory.
But the case study notes that the result of this intense preparation is actually disastrous. He ends up sounding incredibly robotic, stiff, and just highly anxious.
Which logically kind of defies how most of us are taught to approach a challenge.
Exactly. And that is where I have to challenge this whole scenario for a second. From the time we are in elementary school, we are fed this mantra that practice makes perfect, right?
Oh, yeah. Drill it till you get it right.
You study, you memorize, you drill the flashcards until you literally can't get it wrong. So why is Daniel's intense, hours-long preparation objectively degrading his ability to communicate?
Well, you are hitting on what psychologists call the rehearsal paradox.
The rehearsal paradox. Okay, explain that.
The paradox exists because human communication is inherently dynamic, chaotic, and totally unpredictable.
Right.
But Daniel is preparing for a completely static performance. He's treating a dynamic social interaction like a rigid theatrical monologue.
So he isn't actually preparing to communicate. He's building like a linguistic fortress.
Exactly, a fortress. And we see this illuminated so beautifully by Daniel's friend Olivia.
Yes, Olivia. She watches him run through this exhausting mirror routine and finally intervenes.
When she asks why he is practicing with such rigidity, he admits he just wants to guarantee he makes zero mistakes.
And Olivia points out a reality that just shatters his whole premise. She tells him that native English speakers make mistakes constantly.
We really do. We lose our train of thought. We use the wrong verb tense. We completely mispronounce common words all the time.
All the time. The difference isn't the error rate. The difference is the behavioral response to the error.
That is the absolute crux of Olivia's advice. When a native speaker misspeaks, they don't experience an ego collapse.
Right. They don't shut down the whole conversation.
Exactly. They simply issue a real-time correction and just keep moving. The mistake is processed as a minor speed bump, not some catastrophic failure.
But Daniel, on the other hand, is constructing this highly inflexible script specifically to protect his ego. And the danger of a rigid script is its extreme fragility.
It's so fragile. If he relies entirely on rote memorization, building a single brittle neural pathway for this presentation, what happens if he drops one word?
Or if someone in the audience just coughs and distracts him for a second.
The whole script shatters.
Yeah.
Because he has built zero cognitive flexibility into his preparation. He is prioritizing the illusion of control over actual, authentic connection with his audience.
He is trying to manage his colleagues' perception of his intelligence rather than actually sharing his ideas with them.
And corporate cultures often inadvertently reward this, to be fair. We see polish, and we just assume competence, which makes Daniel's fear entirely rational.
It is rational, but Olivia is asking him to undergo a massive paradigm shift. She's asking him to value clarity over perfection.
Which is terrifying when you're used to relying on the delete button.
Armed with that somewhat terrifying reality check, Daniel has to actually face the room. Presentation day arrives, and we finally get to see if this theory holds up under extreme physiological pressure.
And the stakes are incredibly high for him. Daniel barely slept. His autonomic nervous system is in full fight-or-flight mode.
But before he speaks, Daniel enters this really vital observational phase. As he sits in the meeting room waiting his turn, he actively watches his colleagues present.
And he notices anomalies that directly contradict his internal fears.
Yes. One coworker completely blanks on an important data point and just casually checks his notes.
Another mispronounces the name of a brand new client.
And the reaction from the room is just a collective shrug.
There is zero judgment.
Nobody laughs, nobody questions their competence. The meeting just naturally rolls on. Daniel is gathering real-world empirical data proving that his environment is actually forgiving.
The threat is largely internal. But observing someone else survive a public mistake is one thing. Experiencing it yourself is the ultimate test.
Yeah, and eventually his manager calls his name.
The moment of truth.
Daniel stands up, he takes a breath, and he launches into his perfectly rehearsed script. And for the first minute, he is flawless.
He is riding the rails of his memorization.
He really is. But then the climax of the story hits. He is explaining a critical customer success project, and instead of saying customer satisfaction, he accidentally says customer celebration.
A minor semantic slip. Honestly, a completely understandable vocabulary swap under pressure.
But for Daniel, in that exact fraction of a second, the script breaks, and it feels catastrophic.
He freezes completely.
The case study describes his face just burning up. His internal panic alarm is deafening. He is standing there in silence, convinced he has ruined everything, certain that his colleagues are silently judging his broken English.
This is the exact scenario he spent hours in front of the mirror trying to prevent. He is completely exposed.
So what happens when the fortress falls? The room does not erupt into mocking laughter. His manager doesn't look disappointed. Instead, something profoundly ordinary happens.
His manager just smiles gently and says, "It's okay, Daniel. We know what you meant."
A few colleagues nod encouragingly. They aren't there to audit his syntax.
Not at all. They are there to understand his project.
It reminds me of the mechanics of tripping on a crowded city sidewalk.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
It's the absolute worst. But think about it. If you are walking down a busy street and you catch your toe on a crack and stumble, it's a very public mistake.
Sure, everyone sees it.
But if you just pop right back up, maybe, chuckle to yourself and keep walking, the crowd instantly moves on. You haven't disrupted the flow. But if you trip and then you just sit there on the pavement, frozen in panic, refusing to move because you are so mortified, that is when the situation becomes agonizingly awkward.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The awkwardness is not generated by the stumble itself. The awkwardness is generated by the freeze.
Exactly.
When you freeze, you disrupt the social contract. You force everyone else in the room to stop what they are doing and manage your emotional state.
And in that meeting room, Daniel realizes he is sitting on the sidewalk. He finally grasps that his audience is listening for the substance of his ideas, not evaluating the polish of his grammar.
So he makes a choice.
He pops back up from the pavement.
He takes a breath, smiles, and says, "Let me correct that. I meant customer satisfaction."
He executes the pivot.
And the tension in the room instantly evaporates. A few people even laugh softly, but it's a shared empathetic laugh. They are laughing with him.
The pivot is the behavioral shift that changes everything here. And the case study highlights a really remarkable cognitive transformation that occurs immediately after this moment.
Ironically, once Daniel explicitly makes a mistake, owns it, and abandons the rigid script, his English suddenly sounds significantly more natural and fluent.
Because the loading wheel of death is finally gone. The cognitive bottleneck just clears.
Precisely. He is no longer devoting massive amounts of working memory to monitoring his grammar and suppressing his anxiety.
He has freed up his cognitive resources to do what they are actually meant to do, connect with the audience, and articulate his thoughts.
He has transitioned from performing to communicating.
And he absolutely crushes the rest of the presentation. The room applauds. But the most poignant moment of the entire narrative happens afterward, during a one-on-one with his manager.
Daniel is still a bit hung up on the fact that his delivery wasn't flawless, right?
Yeah. He points out to her, "But I made mistakes." And her response is the absolute core thesis of this entire deep dive.
She replies, "Yes, so did everyone else." And then she delivers a line that perfectly encapsulates the psychology of effective communication. She says, People remember clear ideas far longer than perfect grammar.
People remember clear ideas far longer than perfect grammar. I love that. If we pull back from Daniel's specific corporate linguistic journey for a second and look at the broader implications for you, the listener, the utility of this mindset shift is massive.
The application extends far beyond acquiring a second language. I mean, this is about how we approach any steep learning curve.
Really anything. Whether you are stepping up into a demanding new leadership role at your company or trying to learn complex software or even just sitting in a pottery class for the very first time trying to center clay on a wheel.
Every single mispronounced word, every awkward silence where you lose your train of thought, every lopsided, collapsed bowl, none of those are indicators that you are an imposter or fundamentally incapable.
No, they are the literal mechanical signs that your brain is acquiring new skills.
They are the adult equivalent of the toddler's falls. They are the essential data points your neural pathways require to calibrate, adjust, and improve.
When we use our adult environments to artificially edit out mistakes before they happen, we aren't just protecting our egos. We are actively editing out the learning process itself.
Perfection is not only the enemy of connection, it is the enemy of clarity and growth.
We've explored the hidden psychological costs of the delete button and asynchronous safety nets. We've dismantled the rehearsal paradox, showing exactly why rigid preparation shatters under dynamic pressure.
And we've seen the sheer mechanical power of owning the stumble, popping up from the sidewalk, and moving forward.
It all circles back to the realization that your audience, whether it's a boardroom full of colleagues, a social gathering of friends, or a crowd of strangers, they are almost universally rooting for you.
They really are. They just want the substance of what you have to say.
They crave the authenticity of the idea, not the sanitized polish of the delivery. Which leaves me with one final question for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
I'm curious what this is.
If it is a psychological fact that people remember clear ideas far, far longer than perfect execution, what brilliant idea of yours are you currently hiding from the world just because you haven't figured out the perfect way to say it yet?
So think about the physical sensation you get when you're about to walk into a high-stakes job interview.
Oh, yeah. The sweaty palms.
Exactly. Your heart rate elevates, your palms sweat, and your brain suddenly feels like it's, I don't know, operating on dial-up internet.
Like it just completely freezes up on you.
Right. And you are entirely convinced that your professional worth is about to be judged on this strict binary scale of absolute perfection versus just total failure.
It's so true. We tend to treat everyday professional interactions as if like one stutter or one misplaced word will instantly disqualify us.
Yeah, and that intense pressure cooker environment is actually the focal point of today's deep dive. We're examining a story originally designed for B2 level English language learners.
Which is such an interesting lens for this topic.
It really is. The story follows a 27-year-old guy named Michael. He's got a degree in business administration, 2 years of experience as a sales assistant, and he has just landed this massive interview for a marketing coordinator role at an international company.
And, the premise of the source material is explicitly about navigating this high-pressure scenario in a second language, which obviously adds a really distinct layer of vulnerability.
Oh, for sure.
But the underlying mechanics of what Michael experiences and the strategies he uses to ultimately succeed, well, they are universally applicable to anyone listening to this right now.
Totally. So our mission today is to extract those core mechanics of successful communication under pressure.
Right, looking past just the language learning aspect.
Exactly. We want to uncover the neurobiology of performance anxiety, the pervasive myth that you need to be flawless to be competent, and honestly, the sheer pragmatic power of authenticity.
Because whether you are prepping for a major career transition, pitching a new client, or, just trying to survive the daily gauntlet of corporate communication, Michael's journey provides this really fascinating blueprint.
It really does. So let's start by establishing Michael's baseline psychological state as the interview approaches.
It's not great.
No, it's not. Despite having the right qualifications and a solid track record in sales, his anxiety is just entirely hijacking his prefrontal cortex. The source material details this internal monologue that is essentially like a highlight reel of catastrophic thinking.
Yeah, his brain is just spiraling.
Okay, let's unpack this. He is sitting there running through this barrage of what-ifs. He's thinking, what if, I forget the right words, what if I make grammar mistakes? What if I don't understand the interviewer's question?
It's panic mode.
Total panic. He is treating this conversation like a rigid academic exam, where the interviewer is just waiting to deduct points for every misplaced preposition. And, I find it fascinating how we naturally conflate linguistic perfection or just having a highly polished presentation with actual underlying professional competence.
Right, like if we stumble, we're suddenly bad at our jobs.
Yes. We just assume that if we don't sound like a slick corporate brochure, we won't be perceived as capable. It's like we think it's a spelling bee instead of a conversation between future colleagues.
And what's fascinating here is that this response, it's actually deeply rooted in our evolutionary psychology.
Oh, wait, really? How so?
Well, think about it. An interview is a highly consequential but totally uncontrollable environment.
Yeah.
You cannot predict the exact questions they'll ask, so your brain desperately latches onto the variables you think you can control.
Like having perfect grammar.
Exactly, perfect grammar, or rehearsing a very specific, polished sentence over and over. But the turning point in our source material happens when Michael visits a bookstore. He picks up a copy of a book called Knock 'em Dead Job Interview by Martin Yate.
Okay.
And the core insight he pulls from this book fundamentally dismantles that whole academic exam mentality. He realizes that interviewers are not out there hunting for a flawless orator.
Right. They aren't hiring a public speaker.
Exactly. They are looking for problem solvers. They want clear communicators and resilient team players.
That is such a massive shift. It changes the entire objective from performing to actually connecting.
It completely flips the script.
Yeah. Because if the interviewer is looking for a problem solver, then, the momentary struggle to find the right word isn't a failure. It's actually a real-time demonstration of how you handle friction.
Precisely. You stop trying to be a perfect robot and you start showing them how you navigate being a competent human.
Which is so much more valuable. And that realization is the catalyst that moves Michael out of that state of amygdala-driven panic and into productive preparation.
Yeah, he finally understands that his ability to project confidence and build a rapport will carry way more weight than having, an encyclopedic vocabulary.
Which transitions us beautifully into the architecture of his preparation.
Yeah.
Because, knowing that perfection is a myth is great theory, but you still have to put in the practical work to actually rewire your brain's default panic response.
Right. Theory only gets you so far.
Exactly. So Michael starts by addressing the physical reality of communication. The source notes that he studies Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which directs his attention to nonverbal cues.
The physical stuff.
Yeah. He actively practices making eye contact, demonstrating genuine interest, and just smiling naturally. And I imagine this isn't just about looking approachable to the interviewer.
No, not at all.
Physically practicing a relaxed smile and steady eye contact probably activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
It signals to his own brain that he is safe, that he's not under attack.
You are hitting on a really crucial biofeedback loop there. By consciously regulating his physical posture and his facial expressions, he is actively downregulating his own stress hormones.
It's like hacking his own nervous system.
It really is. But he doesn't ignore the verbal component either. He just approaches it differently. He starts engaging in low-stakes immersion.
Like what? What does he do?
Well, every morning he listens to an English podcast to practice useful phrasing aloud. And he studies a book called English Vocabulary in Use to Internalize High-Impact Concepts. Words like initiative, adaptability, collaboration, leadership, and problem-solving.
Okay, I do want to push back on this specific part of his strategy.
True.
Okay, let's hear it. If Michael is drilling a vocabulary book and repeating podcast phrases on his morning commute, isn't there a huge risk that he's just swapping his grammar perfectionism for vocabulary memorization?
I see what you're saying.
It seems to me that memorizing corporate buzzwords could make him sound incredibly robotic, kind of like an actor awkwardly waiting for their exact cue to drop the word synergy into a sentence.
Yeah, that is a very common trap, and honestly, it's where a lot of candidates totally freeze up. But the source text makes a really distinct point of clarifying his methodology here.
How so?
Michael is deliberately practicing using these words naturally. He isn't memorizing dictionary definitions or drafting long, rigid speeches about, a time he showed leadership.
Oh, I see. That kind of mirrors how jazz musicians practice.
What do you mean?
Well, they don't memorize the exact sequence of notes for a solo they're going to play next week. They practice the scales relentlessly so that when they are on stage and the music shifts unexpectedly, they have the raw materials to improvise.
Right.
They're building a toolkit. They're not writing a script.
That is the perfect distinction. To use a geographic analogy, it's like the difference between memorizing turn-by-turn directions to a specific restaurant versus taking the time to actually learn your way around the neighborhood.
Oh, like that.
If a road is closed, the person with the rigid turn-by-turn directions just completely panics. They're lost. But the person who knows the neighborhood, they simply take a different street.
They just read around it.
Exactly. Michael is familiarizing himself with his professional neighborhood by making sure concepts like collaboration are easily accessible in his working memory. He can navigate toward them naturally whenever a relevant topic arises.
That makes a lot of sense. But, knowing the neighborhood conceptually is one thing. You still actually have to drive the car.
True.
Theory is absolutely useless without application.
Which brings us to the crucible of his preparation, which is the mock interview with his friend Emma.
Yes, the stress test.
Right. This part of the narrative really highlights the necessity of external feedback because his first attempt at answering questions is understandably pretty rough. Yeah, the mock interview serves as a stress test for that newly built toolkit. Emma opens with probably the most notoriously open-ended question in the corporate world. Tell me about yourself.
The absolute worst question.
It really is. And Michael's initial instinct is to ramble. He completely over-explains.
But Emma gives him incredibly pragmatic feedback. She tells him to keep it clear and relevant. And this forces Michael to distill his entire sprawling background into a punchy synthesis and summary.
He has to edit himself.
Exactly. So he states his name, his 2 years of grounding in sales, his capacity for teamwork, and his specific ambition to transition into marketing at an international level.
That is so much better.
It instantly transforms a sprawling biography into a highly targeted value proposition.
And he applies that same rigorous editing to the dreaded weakness question, too.
Oh, how does he handle that one? That's always tricky.
Well, rather than offering a thinly veiled brag like, oh, I'm such a perfectionist, or, oversharing some genuine disqualifier, he finds the strategic middle ground. He admits that early in his career, he really struggled with delegating tasks. But then he immediately pivots to the actionable steps he is taking right now to build trust and improve his collaboration with teammates.
Wow, that shows like a ton of self-awareness and a really proactive growth mindset.
It really does.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When they practice behavioral questions, like describing a past challenge, Michael employs the STAR method.
Right, the classic STAR method.
Now, I know anyone listening to this who was prepped for an interview in the last decade is super familiar with situation, task, action, result. It's practically industry standard at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
He uses it to frame a story about handling an urgent customer complaint. He lays out the angry client, his action of working with the manager, and the result of retaining the business. But I hypothesize that for Michael, leaning on an acronym like STAR isn't just about telling a good story.
What do you think it's about then?
I think it's about neurobiology. Like, I imagine that having a predetermined structural framework actively offloads the mental processing required to communicate under that kind of pressure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are basically describing the exact mechanics of cognitive load theory.
Okay, cognitive load theory.
Yeah, so human working memory, which is essentially our brain's RAM, has a very strictly limited capacity.
Right, it can only hold so much data at once.
Exactly. So when you are sitting in a high-stakes interview, your cognitive load is already practically maxed out just processing the environment and managing your baseline anxiety.
You're running hot.
Yes. If you are simultaneously trying to invent a narrative structure and remember the sequence of events and ensure you are answering the prompt and then translate all of that into a second language or polished corporate phrasing, you overload the system.
The brain crashes.
It effectively crashes. You end up stuttering, you freeze, or you just ramble.
Because the basic scaffolding of the conversation is taking up all the energy that should be going into the actual connection with the interviewer.
Precisely. The STAR method acts as external scaffolding. Because Michael knows the inherent shape of his answer, like he knows he simply has to hit those 4 structural beats. He doesn't have to expend precious mental energy organizing his thoughts on the fly.
The framework just holds the weight of the narrative for it.
Exactly. This dramatically reduces his cognitive load. It frees up his mental RAM to focus on the nuance of his vocabulary, his tone of voice, his pacing, and, maintaining that steady eye contact we discussed earlier.
It also ensures that his answers are doing multiple jobs at once. The source notes that when Emma asks, "Why do you want to work here?" Michael explicitly mentions the company's reputation for innovation and customer satisfaction.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah. Because his cognitive load is managed, he has the bandwidth to strategically weave his company research into his response, which proves his alignment with their specific values. He has built this incredibly sturdy yet flexible foundation.
He really has.
But, as we all know, a mock interview in your living room with a friend is a very controlled environment.
Yes, it is.
The true test of these mechanics only happens when the variables become unpredictable.
Which brings us to the actual day of the interview. This is where all that theoretical preparation finally collides with reality.
The source material acknowledges that Michael is nervous, which, is the appropriate physiological response. But he leans heavily on the architecture he built. He executes those nonverbal cues. He greets the interviewer warmly, he smiles to regulate his nervous system, and he listens intently.
And then the exact nightmare scenario happens.
Yes, the scenario that fueled his anxiety at the very beginning of the story actually materializes. The interviewer asks a question, and Michael realizes he does not fully understand what is being asked.
This is it. This is the ultimate stress test of his entire paradigm shift. He is face-to-face with the exact what-if that was keeping him awake at night.
And the overwhelming instinct in a moment like this, for almost everyone, is self-preservation through masking.
Oh, absolutely.
You just want to nod, pick out the one or two words you did comprehend, and just start talking, desperately hoping you stumble into an acceptable answer.
Fake it till you make it. Right.
Exactly. Because when you are already hyper-aware of your language skills, pausing to ask a clarifying question feels like holding up a giant neon sign that says, "I am incompetent." You fear that asking for help shatters the illusion of perfection.
But Michael completely resists that instinct.
He does. Instead of faking it, he maintains his composure and simply says, "I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?" He directly asks for clarification.
Which is so brave.
It is. And according to the source, this doesn't count against him at all. The interviewer actively appreciates his honesty and his professionalism. And, well, fast forward a bit, and Michael actually receives the job offer.
Amazing.
Yeah, his new manager specifically highlights his positive attitude, his clear communication, and his willingness to learn. But let's dig into the mechanism of why this actually worked.
Yeah, let's break that down.
Because why would a hiring manager who is evaluating someone's communication skills actually be impressed by a candidate halting the interview to admit they didn't understand?
It's a great point, and it raises an important question about the actual pragmatic values of a functional workplace and how that contrasts sharply with the performative values we think are expected of us.
Okay, there's more about that.
Well, to understand why the manager liked this, we just have to evaluate the alternative. If Michael had masked his confusion, guessed at the meaning, and then provided a totally irrelevant answer, what data does that actually give the hiring manager?
It signals that when Michael is unsure, his priority is protecting his own ego rather than actually achieving clarity.
Exactly.
It is the manager that he's a liability.
Exactly. In a real-world business context, imagine he is managing a critical marketing campaign with a massive budget. That specific behavioral trait is disastrous.
Oh, it would be terrible.
If you give a directive and your coordinator fakes understanding just to save face, they're going to execute the wrong strategy, waste capital, and create massive downstream problems. A functional business doesn't need employees who pretend to know everything.
Right.
It needs employees who know how to identify their own blind spots and who will actively seek the information required to do the job correctly.
That makes total sense. We often think the interview is a test of our knowledge, but it's actually an audition for how we handle being part of a team.
That's a great way to put it.
By asking for the question to be repeated, Michael provides empirical evidence of his professional maturity. He proves that he values true understanding and accurate execution far more than the appearance of perfection.
And it is a profound display of confidence, really.
Yeah, because you have to be deeply secure in your baseline competence to comfortably admit a momentary gap in comprehension like that.
It completely validates the initial thesis he learned from Martin Yates' book. The hiring manager wasn't evaluating Michael against a rubric of flawless grammar or robotic delivery.
They wanted a human.
They were evaluating his authenticity, his honesty, and his ability to navigate a moment of friction with grace. Clear, honest communication, even when it involves admitting a deficit, will systematically outperform flawless but shallow execution every single time.
It completely reframes the entire concept of professional communication. He secured a highly competitive role, not because he scrubbed away all of his imperfections, but because he demonstrated exactly how he manages them.
Exactly.
So, for you listening to this, whether you have a major interview on the horizon, a big client presentation, or you are just trying to be heard in your weekly team meetings, let's distill the mechanics of Michael's approach so you can deploy them yourself.
The takeaways.
Yeah, first, shift your preparation from scripting to tool building. Don't memorize monologues. Instead, familiarize yourself with your professional neighborhood. Internalize the concepts and the vocabulary that matter, but leave yourself the flexibility to navigate naturally.
That flexibility is key.
Second, consciously manage your cognitive load. Utilize established frameworks like the STAR method, not just to tell better stories, but to act as external scaffolding for your brain. By offloading that structural work, you free up the mental bandwidth required to actively listen, maintain regulating nonverbal cues, and actually connect with the person across the table.
Beautifully said.
And finally, you have to genuinely internalize the reality that perfection is a myth that actively works against you. The people evaluating you are looking for competent humans, not infallible robots.
Be a human.
Yes. Prioritize true understanding over the appearance of knowing it all. If you miss something, just ask for clarification. Showing up as your authentic self, equipped with preparation but entirely comfortable with your own vulnerability, is frankly the most powerful communication strategy you can employ.
And this entire exploration leaves us with a rather profound implication to consider regarding the environments we work in every single day.
Oh, where are we going with this?
Well, we've analyzed how Michael's commitment to authentic, imperfect communication, prioritizing clarity over ego, won him the job in a high-stakes scenario.
Right.
But what happens after the onboarding process is over? If we definitively know that hiring managers and leaders prioritize clear problem solving and honesty over highly polished, flawless rhetoric in the interview room, how might that reality change the way we evaluate our peers in everyday corporate culture?
No, that's a really good question.
Could systematically embracing imperfect communication in our daily stand-ups and strategy meetings actually strip away the layers of dense corporate jargon and posturing we all tend to hide behind?
It's entirely possible.
Right. If an entire organization stopped trying to sound flawlessly professional and instead prioritized the kind of raw, true understanding Michael demonstrated when he simply asked them to repeat the question, could that lead to more honest, highly innovative, and deeply functional teams?
I think it would.
It is absolutely worth pondering how adopting the Michael approach could revolutionize not just how we survive the hiring process, but how we fundamentally rethink collaboration once we are finally through the door.
Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're going to unpack something I think, pretty much everyone has experienced at some point.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
Right. Like, have you ever been in a meeting, you understand the topic completely, and you have this brilliant point to share, but you just stay completely silent?
You're just totally frozen.
Exactly. You stay quiet simply because you are terrified of using the wrong words.
Yeah.
And that silent frustration is exactly what we're exploring in our source material today.
It's such a relatable scenario for anyone working internationally.
It really is. Our mission today is to look at a 32-year-old project manager named Emma. She works at an international tech company, manages complex projects, and, she uses digital tools to communicate globally every single day.
And she's doing all of this in English, which isn't her first language.
Right. And the irony here is that her English grammar is actually quite good. She understands the mechanical rules perfectly fine.
But putting it into practice in real time is a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. The moment her colleagues start debating nuanced topics, things like the influence of social media or the future of tech, she just completely freezes up. She feels her vocabulary is too limited to really express her true thoughts.
It is this uniquely frustrating cognitive bottleneck. You are sitting there, the conversation is moving at the speed of native fluency, and you simply cannot find the entry point.
Yeah, I'd compare it to having this high-performance engine, but the wrong tires for the terrain. She has the intelligence and the ideas. She just lacks the specific traction to move the conversation forward.
That is a great analogy. The gap between understanding a concept like, say, cybersecurity and having the precise linguistic tools to debate it on the fly, it requires a massive amount of mental processing.
Because it's not just about Knowing a list of words, right?
Right. It's about cognitive navigation under pressure. It's tough.
And we are going to look at exactly how she conquers this very modern challenge, because clearly mastering grammar just isn't enough to survive in a corporate discussion today.
Not at all. You need a completely different strategy.
So let's look at the specific inciting incident from the sources. Emma is sitting in this international team meeting, and the topic on the table is broad but super relevant. They're discussing how modern life has changed the way we work and communicate.
A very standard corporate discussion topic.
Very standard. And the room is just going for it. Her colleagues are throwing out opinions on remote work. They're diving into social media, explaining how artificial intelligence is transforming their industry.
They are entirely in their element.
Meanwhile, Emma has plenty of ideas, but she hesitates. The text notes she is so afraid of choosing the wrong words that she just quietly listens.
Which is heartbreaking, really. But if we look at the psychology of her silence here, the true barrier isn't a lack of dictionary definitions.
No. Then what is it?
It is the paralyzing fear of imperfection. She is essentially editing herself before she even opens her mouth.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I do that all the time.
Most people do. In a high-stakes environment like a corporate boardroom, the brain often prioritizes risk avoidance over expression.
So if she is sitting in that boardroom, her brain is essentially treating a potential grammatical error the same way it would treat like a physical threat.
Precisely. It hits the brakes to protect her social status in the group.
That is wild.
It's basic biology. The amygdala perceives the potential for public embarrassment as a threat, and that triggers a minor stress response.
And stress makes everything harder.
Exactly. When you are stressed, your working memory, which is exactly what you need to translate thoughts into a second language, gets severely compromised.
So her brain is literally working against her.
Yes. But Emma realizes after this meeting that simply taking another general English course isn't going to fix this biological response. She specifically needs to learn how to process and discuss modern topics with confidence.
Which brings us to her strategy. And I have to admit, looking at her initial approach here, I am incredibly puzzled.
Oh, why is that?
Well, she doesn't go online and buy a massive technical glossary. She goes to a bookstore for inspiration. And she picks up two specific books.
Hans Rosling's Factfulness and Nicholas Carr's The Shallows.
Right. Wait, if she is trying to learn English vocabulary to survive tech meetings, why is she reading a book about global statistics and another one about the psychological effects of screen time?
I know, it sounds like pure procrastination, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. Like she's avoiding the actual studying.
It absolutely seems counterintuitive if you view language learning purely as data entry. But if we look at the mechanics of how the brain acquires language, it is actually a masterstroke.
Okay, color me intrigued. How does reading about screen time help her speak English?
Well, let's look at Nicholas Carr's The Shallows first. That book explores how constant technology use and screen time affect our attention, our neuroplasticity, and our ability to engage in deep thinking.
Right, the whole shrinking attention span thing.
Exactly. Through reading this, Emma notices that checking her phone every few minutes is making it incredibly difficult for her to concentrate. So she sets healthier boundaries with her technology.
Okay, so she is recognizing that her attention span is fractured. But again, how does fixing her phone habits actually help her speak English better in a boardroom?
It comes back to that working memory we just talked about. Second language processing requires a massive amount of cognitive RAM.
Oh, like a computer.
Yes, exactly like a computer. You have to hold the incoming argument in your mind, translate it, formulate your own response, apply the grammatical rules, and then articulate it aloud.
That is a lot of tabs open at once.
Too many tabs. If your attention span is constantly fractured by dopamine-seeking phone habits, your brain essentially dumps that temporary memory buffer every few minutes.
Wow, okay. That makes so much sense.
You cannot engage in a nuanced conversation about complex issues if your cognitive machinery is constantly rebooting. By protecting her attention span, she is repairing the hardware she needs to actually listen and build arguments.
I see. She is optimizing her brain's processing power before she tries to install the new software. She's clearing the RAM.
Exactly. But that just gives her the energy to focus. It doesn't give her the actual vocabulary.
Right, which brings us to the other book, Factfulness. This one encourages readers to think critically about the world rather than just absorbing assumptions and, negative headlines.
Yes, and from this, Emma learns that informed conversations require curiosity and open-mindedness. It shifts her entire cognitive framing.
How so?
Instead of walking into a meeting feeling defensive or terrified of being wrong, she is walking in with a baseline of curiosity.
Oh, I like that. It lowers the stakes.
It does. You cannot confidently debate a topic if your underlying worldview is based on untested assumptions. She is building an intellectual foundation so that when she does learn the vocabulary, she actually has something meaningful to say.
Okay, so she has stopped the mental drain by fixing her attention span, and she has shifted her mindset to curiosity. Now let's get into the actual software installation.
The vocabulary acquisition phase.
Right, because her strategy here completely bypasses traditional memorization. It's this very deliberate two-pronged approach.
What's her first step?
First, she starts listening to the Easy English podcast on her morning commute. But she isn't just passively consuming it. She's actively listening for how ideas are organized.
She's hunting for structure.
Exactly. She specifically focuses on polite phrasing and complete expressions. Things like, from my point of view, or one major advantage is...
On the other hand, technology has made our lives more convenient, but...
Yes. Finding a healthy balance is essential. She is lifting these entire blocks of text and making them part of her everyday English.
The underlying linguistic strategy here is known as conversational scaffolding.
Scaffolding, like building a house.
Exactly. Learning whole phrases rather than isolated words is arguably the most efficient way to hack your cognitive load.
You know, it reminds me of playing a complex video game using macros, those pre-programmed button combinations.
Oh, that's a great comparison. Tell me more.
Well, if you have to manually mash 10 different buttons in a specific order to execute a move while someone is attacking you in the game, you're going to mess it up.
Your brain panics.
Right. But if you bind all those actions to one single macro button, you just hit it once and the game does the rest. You're saving your mental energy for the actual strategy of the game.
That is an incredibly accurate way to look at it. When you are in that high-pressure meeting, your cognitive load is maxed out.
The amygdala is firing.
Right. If you have to build every single sentence from scratch, searching for the subject, matching the verb tense, finding the right preposition, you will freeze.
It's too many buttons to press.
But if you have this scaffolding preloaded, your brain doesn't have to work to construct the beginning of the argument. If you already deeply know the macro phrase, one major advantage is you just deploy it automatically.
It allows Emma to focus her mental energy entirely on the idea she wants to express, rather than panicking about the grammar in real time.
It completely lowers the barrier to entry for speaking up.
So she has her macros ready. Then she moves to the second prong of her strategy. She uses a resource called English Vocabulary in Use to master the heavy-hitting concepts of the modern corporate world.
Words like innovation, sustainability, digital communication.
Cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, misinformation, the big ones.
But the crucial step here is how she processes these concepts. The source notes that she stops memorizing dictionary definitions entirely.
Yes, this is the part that really stood out to me. Instead of using flashcards with definitions, for every single new word she learns, she writes an original sentence using that word.
She ties it directly to her own life.
Right. So instead of just memorizing the definition of cybersecurity, she writes a sentence about the actual new cybersecurity protocol her specific team is implementing at work.
And this is where we transition from passive learning to active encoding.
Which means what, exactly, for her brain?
Well, when you just read a definition, you are using semantic memory, just storing a raw fact. The brain is very good at filtering those out and forgetting them because they lack context.
You're just useless trivia.
Exactly. But when you write an original sentence, tying that vocabulary word to your own life, your boss, your specific project, you are utilizing episodic memory. You are creating a self-referential neural pathway.
So you're basically tricking your brain into thinking this new word is a vital piece of your personal identity, so it better hold on to it.
Exactly. You are bypassing the brain's short-term filtering mechanism by tagging the information with personal relevance. It moves the word from a static list on a page into your working memory, ready for retrieval.
Man, that is so smart. So her cognitive RAM is clear, her macros are programmed, and she has hard-coded the vocabulary into her episodic memory.
She is fully prepared.
But, I mean, all the original sentences in the world are completely useless if you never actually open your mouth. Theory eventually has to meet practice.
Which is often the most painful step for language learners. You have to step into the crucible.
Yeah, you have to actually do the thing. So we follow Emma as she takes these new tools out into the wild. She joins an online English discussion group.
A safe space to practice.
Exactly. Every week, The members meet up on a video call to debate current topics: artificial intelligence, climate change, online education, the future of work. She essentially finds a sandbox environment for everything she has been studying.
That is brilliant.
At first, the source notes she speaks only briefly, but soon she has this major revelation. She realizes that everyone in the group is learning, and absolutely nobody expects perfect English.
The ultimate goal is simply the respectful exchange of ideas.
Right. And what happens to her brain when she realizes that?
What we are seeing here is the power of psychological safety. Remember how we discussed the amygdala treating the corporate boardroom like a threat, spiking her cortisol and suppressing her language recall?
Right, the whole freeze response?
Well, this discussion group does the exact opposite. Because it is a low-stakes environment where mistakes are normalized, her brain does not perceive a social threat.
So the alarm bells stop ringing.
Her cortisol levels drop. This allows her prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex cognitive behavior and decision-making, to finally take over.
So in this psychologically safe environment, her existing vocabulary finally has the physiological permission to surface.
Exactly. It wasn't just about learning the words, it was about hacking her biological stress response so she could actually access the words she already knew.
She learns that communication is a collaborative effort, not a solo performance on a stage where everyone is just waiting for you to fail.
It shifts her entire paradigm. In the boardroom, speaking felt like a test she could fail. In the discussion group, it is a bridge they are building together.
And because the threat level is low, every time she shares an opinion, her brain receives a positive feedback loop.
She realizes that the world does not end if she uses the wrong preposition.
Which proves that confidence isn't something you acquire before you speak. It is the direct result of surviving the messy, imperfect process of trying to be understood.
You have to wade through the awkwardness to get to the fluency.
And that biological and psychological conditioning, well, it prepares her for the ultimate test of all this preparation.
Yes, the payoff.
Several months have passed, and we return to the setting where this whole journey began. Emma is in another international meeting at work, and the topic is, once again, the complexities of modern life.
The same high-stakes boardroom.
The very same.
Yeah.
Her colleagues are debating. But this time, she doesn't stay silent. She confidently shares her opinion. And if you listen to what she actually says, it is remarkably nuanced.
What does she say?
She says, technology has improved communication across the world, but it has also created new challenges.
Boom. There's the macro. The conversational scaffolding. She is effortlessly presenting a balanced view without having to hunt for the grammatical structure.
Yes. Then she applies her active vocabulary. She says, for example, remote work offers flexibility, but maintaining a healthy work-life balance requires discipline.
Beautifully constructed.
And finally, she drops this insight. She says, I believe artificial intelligence should support human creativity rather than replace it.
What is remarkable about this transformation is that she isn't just regurgitating buzzwords. She is using concepts like remote work, flexibility, and artificial intelligence to express causality.
Right, she's actually debating.
She is acknowledging complex trade-offs. She is manipulating the language to serve her specific intellect.
And the corporate environment responds. Her colleagues actually listen carefully. Several of them ask thoughtful questions based on her points, and the discussion becomes deeply productive.
That is the best possible outcome.
It gets better. After the meeting, a coworker approaches her and specifically says, I really enjoyed hearing your perspective.
Oh, that external validation cements the new neural pathways. The source highlights a profound realization Emma has in that moment.
Which is?
Confidence doesn't come from knowing every single technical term. It comes from expressing ideas clearly, listening carefully, and being willing to participate in the exchange.
It is the ultimate reality check for corporate communication. I mean, the workplace is going to endlessly evolve. AI is changing things today. Something else will change things tomorrow.
You simply cannot memorize a static vocabulary list and expect to be prepared for the rest of your career.
Corporate survival requires adaptability, not just rote memorization.
Exactly. The source leaves us with a very powerful framework. In a fast-paced modern world, you do not need to be a walking dictionary. You need to know how to deploy your ideas with curiosity and resilience.
You have to view every conversation as an iterative process.
Precisely.
So let's distill this down for you, the listener, because there's a very clear blueprint here. If you want to elevate your own communication, whether it is in a second language or your native one.
Let's hear it.
First, you have to protect your cognitive RAM. You cannot process complex arguments if your attention span is fractured by constant distractions. Put the phone down.
Crucial first step.
Second, utilize conversational scaffolding. Preload phrases and transition mechanics so your brain isn't wasting energy constructing basic grammar under pressure.
Get those macros ready.
Third, encode new information by tying it to your own personal experience. Bypass the short-term memory filter by making the data matter to you. Write your own sentences.
Activate that episodic memory.
And finally, seek out environments with high psychological safety to practice in, because you have to lower your biological threat response to actually access your knowledge.
It is a brilliant, highly functional blueprint. And looking at all of this, it actually raises a rather provocative question for you to mull over as you navigate your own work environments.
Oh, what's that?
We saw Emma deliver that fantastic insight during her meeting. The idea that artificial intelligence should support human creativity rather than replace it.
A deeply relevant point for the modern workplace, for sure.
But think about the underlying mechanism of Emma's entire journey to arrive at that insight and actually deliver it. Her confidence, her resilience, her ability to hold the room. None of that came from a textbook.
No, it came from practice.
It was built entirely on the vulnerable, often frustrating, deeply human process of stumbling through those initial conversations in her discussion group. It was the struggle to be understood that forced her brain to adapt and grow stronger.
The resistance is what built the muscle.
Exactly. So if we project this forward, if future AI ever reaches the point where it can flawlessly and instantly translate our thoughts in virtual meetings.
Meaning we never have to struggle for the right word.
Right. We never face that cognitive bottleneck. We never have to risk sounding foolish in a second language. Will we lose that essential human grit that Emma developed?
Oh, wow.
If technology removes the friction of communication, does our true confidence still grow? Or does our confidence actually stem from the shared, vulnerable struggle of simply trying to reach across the table and be understood by another human being?
That is a fascinating paradox to leave on. If we eliminate the struggle of communication, do we eliminate the growth that comes with it?
Something to think about.
Because at the end of the day, you can clear your cognitive RAM, you can program all your conversational macros, and you can hack your biological stress response. But the entire system only matters because of the human connection you were trying to make on the other side.
Keep testing those boundaries.
Stay curious and embrace the friction of the conversation.